A snack bar owner saves 10 motorcyclists in a snowstorm. The next day, a long line of motorcycles appears in front of the only snack bar on a forgotten stretch of state highway. That snack bar was called the Heartlight Stop. It sat alone between the border and the coast, where few cars passed and fewer people stopped. Most didn't even notice it. But that night everything changed. Helen Carter, 53 years old, stood behind the counter of her tiny diner. She wiped her hands on a towel and looked at the snow falling outside. The wind howled, and the road was almost buried. It was one of the worst storms she had seen in years. Her young helper, William, was stacking chairs. "Nobody's coming in this weather," he said, his voice soft. "I know," Helen said. "We'll close early tonight." She glanced at the clock, 8:45 p.m. She flipped the sign on the door from open to closed and sighed. The diner had been empty all day. Business had been slow for months. But what really weighed on her heart was the crumpled paper on the counter. Her third eviction notice. The bank had given her 1 week to pay the rent or they'd take her diner. She had begged the bank manager, Edward Morris, for more time. He only sneered and said, "This old place is a ghost. Time to put a gas station here." Helen felt her chest tighten. This was more than a building. Her late husband, Robert, had built this place with his own hands. Every tile, every booth, every photo on the wall told a story. She couldn't let it go. Not without a fight. Suddenly, ROARR. The sound of a loud motorcycle tore through the storm. Helen's eyes widened. Through the thick snow, a shape appeared on the road. A motorcycle slid sideways and crashed near the diner. The rider fell hard into the snow. Without thinking, Helen rushed outside. "Wait, Miss Helen!" William shouted, but she was already opening the door. The wind slapped her face. Snow blew into her eyes. But she didn't stop. She ran to the biker, who groaned and tried to stand. He was tall, wearing a black leather jacket, covered in snow and ice. "Come on, let's get you inside," Helen said, helping him up. More headlights appeared in the distance. 1, 2, 3. 10 motorcycles rumbled toward the diner, their tires sliding in the snow. One by one, the riders parked outside and stumbled into the warm light of the Heartlight Stop. Helen and William worked fast. They pulled in chairs and made space. The bikers were soaked, cold, and shivering. Most looked tough, tattoos, beards, leather jackets, the kind of people others might avoid. But Helen didn't care. "They're just people," she whispered to William. "People who need help." The riders sat around the diner, blowing on their hands, trying to get warm. "I'm sorry we don't have much," Helen told them. "But I'll make what I can." She moved behind the counter and started brewing coffee. She made hot sandwiches with the little bread and meat she had left. William handed out mugs of warm cocoa. The bikers looked surprised. Most people wouldn't even open the door for them, especially not this late at night during a storm. One of the bikers stood out. He was tall, had a deep scar on his cheek, and said little. His name was Mark. He walked around the diner slowly, looking at the pictures on the wall. Helen glanced over and saw him staring at one photo in particular. It was an old black and white picture. It showed Helen's late husband, Robert Carter, helping a group of bikers during a snowstorm in 1997. Robert was smiling, handing out bowls of soup in front of the same diner. Mark's eyes didn't blink. Helen walked over and stood beside him. "That's my Robert," she said quietly. "He loved helping people." Mark nodded slowly. "I know," he whispered. "That's my dad. His name was George Oliver. He told me about this place. Years ago." Helen's eyes widened. "You're George's son." Mark smiled for the first time. "He said a man named Robert saved his life. I never forgot that story." The storm howled louder outside. But inside the air had changed. It wasn't just a diner anymore. It was a place of memories, kindness, and second chances. Later that night, the bikers took turns sleeping in the booths. Helen gave them warm blankets. She didn't ask for money. She didn't care how they looked. When William asked, "Why are you helping them?" she simply said, "Because it's the right thing to do." Mark sat near the window, watching the snow fall. He knew now why the place felt so familiar. His dad had been here, had been saved here. And now it was his turn to do something. He didn't say much that night. But in his heart, something had shifted. By morning, the snow had stopped falling, but the ground outside was still thick with white. The world looked frozen and silent. But inside the Heartlight stop, there was warmth, of food, of stories, and of something new blooming, hope. Helen poured another cup of coffee and handed it to Mark, the tall biker with the scar. He had barely slept but had spent most of the night sitting by the window, lost in thought. "Thank you," he said quietly, taking the cup with both hands. Helen nodded. "You said your father was George Oliver?" Mark looked up and smiled gently. "Yes. He passed away 3 years ago. But before he died, he told me about a place. A small diner where a man helped him during the worst snowstorm he ever faced. That man was your husband." Helen's eyes softened. "Robert was like that. He didn't care who you were. If someone needed help, he was there." Mark stood up and walked to the photo on the wall again. "That's him, right?" Helen nodded. "That picture was taken in 1997. We had a storm just like this one. A group of bikers broke down on the highway. Robert brought them in, fed them, even gave them money for gas. I remember one man had a busted leg and Robert patched him up." Mark's voice cracked a little. "That was my dad. He said that night saved his life." The other bikers were now fully awake and sitting around the diner. One of them, a woman with short red hair named Jessie, spoke up. "Wait, your dad was saved here too?" "No way. My uncle told me a similar story about this place." Another biker chimed in. "Same here. My dad used to tell a story about some guy who helped stranded riders. A little place in the middle of nowhere. I never thought it was real." The room went quiet for a second. William, still holding a tray of toast, looked around in amazement. "You mean, all of you heard stories about this diner?" Mark nodded. "Looks like this place is more important than we thought." Helen's heart felt like it was beating louder. She had spent years feeling invisible, running a diner most people had forgotten. But maybe it hadn't been forgotten at all. "I don't even know what to say," she whispered. Jessie smiled. "You don't have to say anything, Miss Helen. You've already done more than most would." Just then the door opened. A cold breeze entered, and a woman in a long black coat stepped inside. She was tall, with sharp eyes and a confident walk. Mark stood up. "Everyone, this is Anna Pierce. She's a real estate lawyer and an old friend of mine. I called her last night." Helen looked confused. "A lawyer? Why?" Mark stepped forward. "Because I don't think the way they're trying to take your diner is right. You helped us. It's our turn to help you." Anna pulled off her gloves and sat at the counter. "I stayed up all night reading your case. This eviction, it doesn't feel clean. The documents are messy. Some things don't add up." Helen's hands shook slightly. "But I already asked the bank for more time. They refused." Anna looked calm but serious. "They don't want more time. They want the land. But I think they've broken some rules. And if I'm right, we can stop them." Helen stared at her. "Why are you helping me?" Anna looked at Mark, then back at Helen. "Because people like you don't come around often. And because Mark believes in you. That's good enough for me." One of the younger bikers stood up. He had glasses and a laptop tucked into his bag. "I'm Kevin. I do digital stuff. I can search through emails, public records, bank files. If something shady's going on, I'll find it." Helen blinked. "Are you all serious?" Mark stepped beside her. "You saved 10 strangers last night without thinking twice. Now you have 10 friends who won't let you lose this place." William clapped excitedly. "This is like a movie." Everyone laughed. For the first time in a long while, Helen smiled. A real deep smile. She looked out the window at the bright morning sun shining on the snow-covered road. Something felt different. Like the world had shifted. Like she wasn't alone anymore. "All right," Helen said, her voice firm. "Let's fight." Anna opened her laptop. "Then let's get started." While everyone else made breakfast and cleaned up the diner, Anna and Kevin set up a makeshift workspace in one of the booths. They printed papers, highlighted sections of legal files, and clicked through page after page of records. "Look at this," Kevin whispered to Anna after a few hours. "Emails between Edward Morris and a judge named Farrell. They're too friendly. And this line here. Move the court date up before she finds a lawyer. That's not okay." Anna's eyes narrowed. "We might have something here." Outside, the snow was beginning to melt. Inside, a new storm was brewing, not of snow but of justice. Edward Morris thought he could take the Heartlight stop quietly. He had no idea what was coming. The sun peeked out from behind the clouds, melting the thick snow little by little. The road outside the Heartlight stop looked peaceful, but inside the diner, things were anything but quiet. Helen stood behind the counter, watching her new friends work like a team. Her heart still couldn't believe it. Just last night, she was alone and ready to give up. Now, a group of bikers, a lawyer, and a young tech genius were doing everything they could to save her diner. At one of the booths, Anna was typing quickly on her laptop. Her eyes were sharp and focused. Kevin, the tech guy, sat beside her, clicking through documents and emails like a magician. "I found more," Kevin said, turning the screen toward Anna. "There are bank records showing big payments going from Edward Morris to Judge Farrell's personal account." Anna gasped softly. "This is it. This is the proof we need." Helen walked over. "What does that mean?" "It means," Anna said carefully, "the man who's trying to take your diner is working with a dirty judge. That's illegal. They've been rushing cases, pushing out small business owners like you. But we just found the smoking gun." Mark came up behind them. "So, what do we do now?" Anna leaned back. "We take this to court. But first, we need to surprise them." Kevin nodded. "If we go now, Morris won't have time to cover his tracks." Helen felt nervous. "But what if the judge doesn't listen?" Anna looked straight into her eyes. "You helped us. Now trust us to help you." Just then the front door creaked open. A sharp gust of wind followed. And behind it stood a man in a dark coat with shiny shoes and a sneer on his face. Edward Morris. Helen's face went pale. "Well, well," Edward said, stepping inside with fake charm. "Still open for business, Helen?" Mark stepped forward like a wall. "What do you want?" Edward smiled. "Just here to remind you, 1 week left. Or should I say 6 days now. You'd better pack your things. I already have the gas company ready to break ground." Helen clenched her fists, but she didn't speak. Anna stood up. "You must be Mr. Morris. I'm Helen's attorney. My name is Anna Pierce." Edward raised an eyebrow. "Attorney? That's cute. Bringing in outsiders won't save this shack." Anna opened a folder on the table. "Actually, what might save it are these emails between you and Judge Farrell. You know, the ones where you talk about fixing the court date, hiding records, and pushing out tenants for land deals." Edward's face changed. Kevin turned his laptop around. "We've backed up everything. Emails, bank transfers, meeting logs. You've been sloppy." Edward looked furious. "This is nonsense. You have no right to dig into my emails." Anna didn't flinch. "Actually, when corruption affects a legal case, it becomes public interest. And as of this morning, we've already submitted copies to the state attorney's office." Edward's hands shook. "You'll regret this." "No," Helen said quietly. "You will." Edward turned and stormed out of the diner, slamming the door behind him. William peeked from behind the kitchen. "That was scary." Mark laughed. "He's scared now. That's good." Helen sat down slowly. Her knees felt weak. "I don't know how to thank you all." Jesse, the red-haired biker, leaned on the counter. "Don't thank us yet. We still have a court to face." Anna nodded. "Tomorrow we bring this to the courthouse. If the judge doesn't dismiss it immediately, We push for a full hearing. Kevin grinned. I'll bring a slideshow. Judges love slides. The rest of the day passed quickly. Helen, William, and the bikers worked together like a little family. Some cleaned, some cooked, and others organized documents for the case. Mark made calls to other bikers across the state, telling them what was happening. We need to show up strong, he said. Let them see she's not alone. By evening, Helen stepped outside to get fresh air. She looked at the sky, now painted in orange and pink. She thought of Robert, her husband. I wish you could see this, love, she whispered. I think something amazing is happening. Inside, laughter echoed. People were eating, talking, working together. For the first time in a long time, the Heartlight stop felt alive. The next morning, Helen wore her best coat and tied her hair neatly. She looked in the mirror and gave herself a nod. William came up beside her. You ready, Miss Helen? She smiled. I think I am. They walked outside to the parking lot and stopped. Helen gasped. Dozens of motorcycles lined the street. Riders from all across the state had shown up. Big bikes, small bikes, old bikes, shiny new ones. All of them came for her. Mark walked up in front, holding his helmet. Told you we made a few calls. Helen's eyes filled with tears. Anna stepped beside her. Let's go win this. The courthouse was tall, cold, and full of whispers. But outside it was loud. Motorcycles roared like thunder, lined up in rows, stretching around the courthouse block. People stopped to stare. Some took videos. Journalists rushed in with cameras. They all wanted to know why hundreds of bikers had shown up for a court case. Inside, Helen Carter held her purse tightly. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes were brave. Anna walked beside her, calm and steady. Mark, Kevin, and several bikers followed, their boots clicking on the marble floor. Helen looked around. She had never been inside a courtroom before. The chairs, the judge's bench, the rows of lawyers. It all felt scary. Anna leaned over. Don't worry. You don't have to speak unless the judge asks. I'll handle everything. Helen nodded. Then the door opened. Edward Morris entered, dressed in a sharp gray suit and an ugly grin. His lawyer followed behind him, holding a stack of papers. They walked straight past Helen like she didn't exist. Edward stopped and looked around. What's with all the motorcycles outside? He asked. Mark smirked. Support. Edward scoffed. They won't help her. This is a court, not a circus. But Edward's smirk faded when Judge Delaney, a new judge brought in to replace Judge Farrell, entered the courtroom. The judge looked serious and calm, with gray hair and sharp glasses. All rise, the court officer called. Everyone stood. Judge Delaney sat down. We are here today to review the eviction and foreclosure filed by Edward Morris and his bank against the Heartlight Stop, owned by Mrs. Helen Carter. Helen swallowed hard. Anna stood. Your Honor, we have strong evidence that this eviction was pushed through using illegal methods, including bribes and collusion with the former Judge Farrell. The courtroom gasped. Edward's lawyer stood. Your Honor, this is a distraction. Mrs. Carter simply failed to pay her rent. That is all. Anna opened a folder. We have emails, bank records, and call logs that show Edward Morris made large payments to Judge Farrell shortly before the case was rushed through court. He also moved the court date early to keep Mrs. Carter from finding a lawyer. The judge raised an eyebrow. You have this proof. Kevin stood and handed the bailiff a USB stick. It's all here, sir. We backed it up 3 times. The judge inserted the stick into a monitor and read the emails. His eyes narrowed. This one, the judge read out loud. Move the case up before she finds a lawyer. She's old and alone. Helen flinched. Those words burned in her ears. The judge looked at Edward. Mr. Morris, do you deny this email came from your account? Edward stood sweating. It must have been a joke. You know, office humor. The judge did not smile. This is no joke. Judge Farrell has already been removed for unrelated misconduct. But this ties him directly to your case. I am suspending all decisions made under his orders, effective immediately. Helen's heart jumped. The judge continued. In fact, I am sending this file to the state investigators for possible charges. Mr. Morris, your actions have placed this court in shame. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. Reporters typed quickly on laptops. Edward's face turned red. Helen blinked, stunned. Was this really happening? The judge turned to Anna. Mrs. Pierce, do you believe there is enough cause to reverse the foreclosure? Anna nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Helen Carter was not given a fair hearing. The eviction was not legal. The judge nodded. Then I declare the foreclosure overturned. Mrs. Carter will keep her diner, and Mr. Morris's actions will be reviewed by the Attorney General. There was a pause. Clapping. First it was just Mark, then Kevin. Then the whole courtroom stood in applause. Even the reporters put down their cameras for a moment to cheer. Helen sat down in her chair, her hands shaking, her heart full. She had won. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She turned to Anna. Thank you. Anna smiled. You won because you did the right thing when no one else would. Outside the courthouse, the news spread fast. Reporters shouted questions. Helen, how do you feel? Are the rumors true? You saved bikers in a snowstorm. Is it true your husband helped people like this years ago too? Helen stood on the steps. She wasn't used to cameras or questions. But she took a breath and said, I did what my husband would have done. I helped people who needed help. I didn't know who they were. I just saw cold faces and hungry hearts. Hundreds of bikers behind her revved their engines in support. The sound echoed through the streets like a victory song. Edward Morris slipped out the back, trying not to be seen. But one camera caught him, red-faced, sweating, defeated. The photo would soon be on every news site with headlines like, Bank Boss Caught in Corruption, Small-Town Hero Fights Back. That night, the Heartlight Stop was more than a diner. It was a symbol. Place where kindness won. Place where people stood together. Place no one would ever forget. 1 year later, the little diner that once stood alone on a quiet stretch of highway was no longer just a stop for tired travelers. The Heartlight Stop was now famous. People came from far and wide, not just for the food but for the story. For Helen Carter, the woman who showed kindness in a snowstorm and stood up against a powerful man who tried to take everything from her. Helen stood outside the diner, watching as the parking lot filled with cars, motorcycles, and smiling faces. A large sign above the door read, The Heartlight Stop, a place where kindness lives. The once-old diner now had shiny windows, fresh paint, a new roof, and even a 24-hour repair workshop for travelers. There was a gas pump station beside it, not owned by Edward Morris, but by a local biker group that donated all profits to roadside businesses. Inside, the jukebox played soft music. People laughed and chatted in every booth. Helen wore her red apron proudly as she carried plates of warm waffles and coffee. William, now the diner's full-time manager, handled orders with confidence. He had grown so much since that snowy night. Miss Helen, he said, don't forget your speech. They're waiting outside. Helen laughed nervously. I still don't like speeches. You'll do great. Just speak from the heart. That's what everyone loves about you. Helen stepped outside where a large stage had been set up for the first ever Motorcycle Solidarity Festival, hosted right there at the Heartlight Stop. Hundreds of bikers filled the field beside the diner. There were tents, food trucks, music, games, and even a giant screen playing a documentary titled, The Diner That Stood Tall, Helen Carter's Fight for Justice. The mayor stepped forward with a gold medal in hand. Today we honor a woman who reminded us what courage, kindness, and community truly mean. He placed the medal around Helen's neck. The state's Community Medal of Honor. The crowd cheered. Helen smiled through her tears. I'm just someone who did what felt right, she said into the microphone. I didn't save those bikers expecting anything. I helped them because that's what my husband Robert would have done. And now Now I see that one small act of kindness can spark something so much bigger." The crowd erupted into applause. Motorcycles revved in joy. Back in town things had changed too. Edward Morris, once powerful and feared, had been fired from the bank. His face had been on the news for weeks. After the investigation, all his secret deals were exposed. Now he worked as a night gas station attendant, not far from the diner he tried to destroy. He wore a dark blue uniform and cleaned floors under flickering lights. Every now and then, a biker would stop to fuel up and glance at him. Edward would look away, ashamed. One evening, Helen passed by the gas station. She saw Edward sitting alone on a bench. Their eyes met, but she didn't stop. She didn't need revenge. She had already won. Back at the regional bank headquarters, a new name appeared on the glass door. Marcus Oliver, bank director. Marcus, the quiet biker who had stood by Helen during the court case, was now in charge. He was the son of George Oliver, the man Helen's husband had saved many years ago. Marcus changed the bank's policies. No more secret evictions. No more silence. Now, the bank gave grants and support to long-standing small businesses like Helen's. He created a program called Legacy Hands to protect family-owned shops from being shut down unfairly. In City Hall, new laws were passed. Roadside diners and local rest stops were declared cultural landmarks, meaning they couldn't be destroyed without full community approval. All thanks to Helen's story. Reporters from all over still came to visit. They asked, "How did you stay so strong? Did you ever think of giving up? What's next for the Heartlight stop?" Helen always smiled and answered the same way. "I was never trying to be strong. I just didn't want to see something good disappear." Back inside the diner above the counter was a new photo, bigger than all the others. It showed Robert Carter helping bikers in 1997, and beside it, another photo. Helen with her arm around Mark, Anna, Kevin and William, standing in front of a crowd of bikers and friends. Underneath, in bold letters, it read, "Kindness is never forgotten." At night, when the sky turned orange and purple, Helen sometimes stood outside and looked at the stars. She thought of Robert, of that snowy night, of the moment everything changed. She placed a hand on her heart and whispered, "We did it, love. We saved our home." And far in the distance, the sound of engines echoed once more, not as a warning but as a promise. A long line of motorcycles rode across the highway, headlights glowing in the dusk, not lost travelers anymore, but a family, forever connected by one warm diner and the woman who opened its doors in a snowstorm.